Story 1. I was driving my semi down the road when I noticed something in the distance. There was this thing standing by the side of the road, and I didn't know what to think. It looked very tall and I was too scared to pull over and check it out, so I just drove on. As I passed it, it moved a little bit and looked at me. That is when I started driving faster than I normally would. I don't really know why I was scared, but my mind just went blank. I just kept driving and driving. I don't recall how long I was driving for, but it must have been hours. I remember being in the middle of nowhere when I suddenly saw it again. It was following me. I was so terrified I just kept driving. What else could I do? I just wanted to get home as fast as I possibly could. I didn't know what this thing could do to me, but whatever it was that was wrong, it was going to catch up to me eventually. I didn't have any idea where I was going or why I was driving for so long. I just knew I had to keep going. As I drove further down the road, I suddenly started to see car lights again. I must have been lost for hours and I didn't know it. I hadn't seen any cars for a long time and I was very confused. But this snapped me out of it. My mind finally got clear enough to try to find where I am. I could see there were cars parked in a lot on the side of the road and there were some people walking around. I thought I was saved. I was so relieved. I drove down to the parking lot and realized it was a gas station. I was so happy to see other people and I had so many questions that I just jumped out of the car and ran over to them. But the moment I started talking to these people, I knew something was wrong. They weren't like me. Their eyes were very dark and they weren't moving around much. They looked very confused. I didn't know what to do, so I just walked away. I was so confused. This world was so different. I don't know why, but I decided to go back to my truck. I had to get out of here. As I was walking back to the truck, I saw the thing again. It was running across the parking lot and it was staring at me. It was very angry. I climbed into the truck and drove away. After I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw that thing. It was tall and skinny and it had this very tall neck. It was looking right at me and it was somehow making my mind go blank again. I just drove away as fast as I could. I didn't know what to do. I just had to get away from all of this. My entire body was shaking, but I had to keep going. I had to get home. I managed to find my way back to the highway after driving in the wrong direction for a little bit. I don't know how, but I just kept driving and driving until I was back onto the highway. As soon as I got to the highway, the feeling of dread stopped suddenly. I didn't know why, but it was gone. It was almost like I just got out of the monster's territory or something. I started to calm down and I could think straight again. I don't know what I was thinking before, but I guess I was in some sort of shock. But as I thought about it, it all made sense to me. That thing was real and it was out there. And I just left it back there. I started to wonder if it was still looking for me. I didn't know what to do, so I just kept driving. I was driving along the highway when suddenly I saw a road that looked familiar. I knew where I had to turn. I had to get home. I drove down this road for a few minutes and then I saw my house. I was so happy to get home. But I still didn't feel safe. I wondered if it was still out there. I parked the truck and got out. I half expected this thing to come out of nowhere and attack me, but it didn't. I walked into my house and closed the door and just sat there for a minute. I was so relieved to be back home, but I was still so confused. I just sat there for a little bit thinking about what I had to do. I knew I had to tell someone about this and let everyone know that this creature is out there. I just didn't know who to tell. Be careful if you're ever in the woods, you never know what might be lurking there waiting for you.
Story 2. I was running on a trail in the woods one foggy afternoon when I came around a bend and saw a creepy humanoid figure standing there. The figure had no hair, and his skin was unnaturally pale, almost death-like in coloration. He stood immobile, as if carved from stone, but his eyes seemed to stare straight into my soul. He opened his mouth. I couldn't tell if this was a scream or just him taking a breath, but it still made me panic. My dog was barking at him, and he glanced at her for a moment before he took off running in an awkward, loping gait towards the thick underbrush. I was able to stop the dog from chasing after him. She didn't seem scared of him, but she's a tough, smart dog and she was trying to protect me. I was afraid, so I ran off in the opposite direction. I was able to calm down a bit once I got back to my house, but I didn't go back to that path for over a month. I still have nightmares about it to this day, and I always have the feeling that something is watching me. I was thinking of going to the police, but I don't have any proof that something was there. It was a horror to see him, and I'm so glad my dog chased him away. Who knows what could have happened if he caught me. I never did see anything resembling the man in the woods again. However, later I have found out that there have been other sightings of this creature in the area, so it's best to be careful when running alone in the woods. Be on the lookout for this strange man-like creature. Stay safe, everyone. Story 3. I believe that my childhood home was really haunted. At the age of 9, when my family moved into an old, abandoned house in Louisiana. From that moment, I had always felt like there was something wrong with the place. The vines on the outside were always so thick and green, covering any rustic touch it may have had left to show what it once was. The old porch swing would creak back and forth as if someone or something was pushing you out onto it at night time for no reason. Sometimes you could hear footsteps coming from downstairs after midnight, but nobody ever came upstairs to see who's making them. And then sometimes late at night I would see this little girl looking through the kitchen window with long dark hair just staring inside our home waiting for us to go out. She never gave us any reason to complain or be scared about her. However, you could tell that she had this feeling of regret and sadness. I knew it felt like she was trying to give us some kind of warning, but we didn't know what for. We had no idea who the little girl even was and where she came from. One day after school, I noticed my brother wasn't around and asked my parents where he was, only to find out he had disappeared on his way home from school earlier that day, which really freaked me out because I always walked home with him. The police were asking all kinds of questions, such as if anyone saw anything suspicious or if we heard anyone lurking about our house late at night. No clues whatsoever of who could have done it or why. But he returned later the very same day, as if nothing happened. He didn't remember a thing. My brother never talked about what happened to the police or anyone else for that matter. Shortly after my brother came back, he started having these horrible nightmares and night terrors. He would wake up screaming and in a sweat. He told us that he can't stop seeing this very young girl with long black hair standing in his doorway crying and asking for help. As the years went by, I started to notice more and more things happening in our home. The sounds got louder, the little girl appeared more often, and I even saw what looked like a man standing at the top of our staircase one night, but when I blinked, he was gone. We moved out of that house when I was 14 years old. It wasn't until one day when we were about to move out of this house that my father told me that he also saw the little girl in the window a couple of days earlier, but didn't say anything. He said that he was putting boxes in the garage and suddenly he heard her voice saying, "Don't go." A couple of years later, my parents told me that they found out that the little girl in the window was a young girl who had been murdered in our home back in the 70s. The murderer was never caught. After we moved away, I never heard of or saw anything else strange again. I still believe that there is something more out there though. I guess you can say I'm a little bit of a believer. Thank you for listening to 3 AI Written Scary Stories, Episode 4. Please take care of yourselves and remember, fear is best served artificial.